Hi, Mike here. Usually I make these videos right out of our practice area. I had a couple technical difficulties when I did this presentation to the men in our group a few days ago, and so I decided to re-record it here to share with everybody. And basically, my talk was about I had heard this presentation from Al Cresta about the new evangelization, and it really kind of struck a nerve with me. And I know that everybody doesn't get a chance to hear all the different wonderful things that are available on Catholic radio. So I shared it with the men in my group and put a little spin on it too for the Order of Lepanto. And so here it is. We talk about this new evangelization and what exactly is it, right? Is it just a repackaging, kind of like, a new Tide or a new Coke, right? Is it just kind of cosmetic changes where we put the word new on a box and maybe change the scent a little bit, charge a little bit extra, but substantially it's not really it's really the same thing that it's always been. But the reality is, right, that the new evangelization is not like that. It is not simply a repackaging. It is more about deep surgery, about changing our approach to how we share the message. Just remember that evangelism is Greek, and it means good message, right? To present the good news about the gospel. And then if we talk about the new evangelization, there's no new evangelization. There's no new good message. It is what it is. It's what Jesus left us. It's the deposit of the faith. The new evangelization, part of it is presenting this message in new methods and new expressions. But the old evangelization used new methods as they came about too, right? There was no immediate, every time there was a new way of sharing the faith, the old evangelization shared the faith that way too. What makes the new evangelization distinct is that it is now directed to fallen away Catholics, to lukewarm Catholics, to the Christmas and Easter Catholics. So what is new is that the old is the target, right? So your old evangelization targeted the world. We were supposed to evangelize the world and bring them to the church, bring them to Jesus. But now the new evangelization is targeting those people who are Christian, who are Catholic, but who don't practice and live the faith in their lives. The new evangelization targets those who have been sacramentalized, but not evangelized. There's a quote here from John Paul II. It is possible for baptized Catholics to be still without any explicit personal attachment to Jesus Christ. Entire groups of the baptized have lost a living sense of the faith, or even no longer consider themselves members of the church and live a life far removed from Christ and his gospel. Right? It is possible to go through all the motions without encountering Jesus or personally responding to his call in our lives. Benedict XVI said, being a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty endeavor, but it is an encounter with a person which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. Right? So it's an encounter with a person. The new evangelization is really an admission on the part of John Paul II that the church failed. And lots of people might not like to hear that, but the truth is that we lost 50% of the baptized. 50%. Can you imagine tomorrow morning Amazon opens up their business meeting in the morning, and the CEO gets told that 50% of their customers have stopped using them. Right? That would be an out and out emergency. It would be a failure. The company would be doing everything they could to reverse that trend. Okay? The largest religious demographic in America is Catholic, and the second largest, former Catholics. And not that the Catholic Church is definitely not a business. It's not like Amazon or Ford or any one of a number of different businesses. We're in the business, so to speak, of saving souls. But the truth of the matter is that when 50% of the people who used to believe, used to practice, no longer do, it is an out and out emergency. It is a failure. Matthew Kelly from Dynamic Catholic had conducted this independent Catholic survey about how many Catholics consider themselves dynamic or on fire or converted in the faith. And his response, 6%, for anywhere from 6 to 9%. But think about that for a minute. 6% of people consider themselves on fire. 6% of people consider themselves dynamic or ready to spread the gospel, to evangelize others. New data from a Gallup poll reveals even more discouraging information about the faith life of American Catholics. In 1955, 73% of Catholics aged 21 to 29 attended Mass weekly. That number is now 23%. And for the first time ever, there is not one single generational group of Catholics whose Mass attendance is at least 50%. Now, part of that is that the baby boomer generation, who largely rejected organized religion, is now aging into that group of over 65. But the truth is that is a problem. Partaking of sacraments is important. Sacraments have a power of their own. We know that to be true. But our interior disposition directly affects the level of effectiveness that those sacraments will have in our lives. You can go, or a person can go, through all of the motions and never encounter Jesus and never respond to his call in their lives. So we have to ask ourselves, why is a new evangelization necessary? Why did this failure happen? Well, first of all, for a while, it clearly wasn't a priority. Right? There was no clear gospel message given. For example, in the Vatican I Council, in the latter half of the 1800s, there was not one single mention of gospel or evangelization in any of the documents. Okay? Yet 75 years later, right, Vatican II comes along and it's mentioned over 200 times. So there was a realization in there that things had fallen apart, that things weren't working right. And there was an attempt to start to fix it. In one of these surveys, they asked whether or not spreading the faith is a priority in your local church or parish. Conservative Protestants answered 75%, said it was a priority. Catholics answered 6%. Probably the same 6% who consider themselves dynamic, consider that spreading the gospel was important. But the truth is that 6% of Catholics think that evangelizing and spreading the gospel is important. And that is a stunning failure. Why? Because I think part of it is that many Catholics have been poorly catechized, poorly taught about the faith. They think that all you need to do to go to heaven is to be good, and that everybody will be saved, right? That there's no need to evangelize, right? But the truth is different. That's not what Jesus said in the gospel. Jesus didn't say that we enter heaven through the superhighway. He said we enter through the narrow gate. So it is important to evangelize. It is important for people to learn about Jesus, to accept it, and to live that way in their lives, and then to spread the news again. Many people have been raised Catholic but never heard the gospel, meaning nobody has ever approached them in a personal way and asked them to consider the claims of Christ and encourage them to follow, to change their lives. Now, make no mistake, right? Things are better today than they used to be. But most self-identified Catholics just don't have a good grasp of the gospel. And that is important that we say self-identified, right? Because lots of people identify as Catholics, but go to Mass maybe once or twice a year. Or maybe a little bit more than that, but don't really make it a priority in their lives. These are not the weekly Mass attending Catholics. Because I think if you survey just them, you would have some different statistics, some better statistics. So what is it about the gospel? Let's talk a little bit about the gospel. The gospel is about words. The gospel is an announcement. It is meant to be preached to people. But in our society, we've downgraded the importance of preaching and overall the importance of words. Many have bought into this idea that because God transcends just words, that living becomes more important than saying. There's this quote out there, or supposed quote, that says, "Preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words." It's supposedly from St. Francis of Assisi. But the truth is that quote is fake. St. Francis never said anything like that. And think about it, logically speaking. Do you honestly think that you are living your life in such a way that is so in line with the message of Jesus that Jesus' message can be clearly and completely understood from soup to nuts just by the way you live your life, just by people watching you? I mean, first of all, I don't think that is humanly possible. Right? We communicate by action and by words. We don't communicate the gospel by interpretive dance, right? We spread it by preaching it, by saying it. Words are required in order to spread the news. Pope Paul VI, in his Evangelization in the Modern World, right, he says, "There is no true evangelization if the name, the teaching, the life, the promises, the kingdom, and the mystery of Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God, are not proclaimed. The finest witness will prove ineffective if it is not proclaimed." And St. Peter says, "Always be prepared to offer a defense of the joy within you." Right? I'm not saying don't live the gospel message. Live the gospel message. Be different. But then when somebody comes up and says, "Wow, you have such a joy, you exude such love in your life. How is that possible?" You don't just say, "Watch what I do," right? You say, "Jesus is the reason. Let me show you about my faith. Let me show you about what God has to offer you in your life." Right? Words are vital. It takes it to the next level. And part of that is learning to think about words differently. Right? You see, words are thought given physical form. When God spoke, the universe came into existence. But when we speak, we exhale air from our lungs. We shape it with the muscles in our throat and our tongue. And we give our thoughts a physical form. And then that physical form is transmitted through the air to our listener. And they take that physical form and they turn it back into thought. It's a lesser form of creation, but it is creation nonetheless. It is a way that we share in God's creation. What about the gospel itself? Right, so the gospel itself is not, the word gospel is not necessarily or not primarily a religious word, right? It's a journalistic word. It means that it is a history-changing, life-changing message. It's about big events in history, coronation of a king, or the victory of a major battle. And some people you run into might say that, the gospel is to love the Lord with all your heart, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's a fine way to live, but it really is a command. It's what you're supposed to do. But it's not the good news. Some people might believe that we preach by giving to the poor. But that's a corporal work of mercy. It's important. We're called to do it. But it's not good news. It's a command. It's something we're supposed to do, some way we're supposed to live our lives. You have to remember that evangelization is not everything that the church is or does or teaches. The gospel message is a specific message. It is not about us, but it is about what God has done for us. All religions, Christianity included, propose an ethical system of behavior for their followers, right? What are you supposed to do? What rules are you supposed to live by in your life? But Christianity goes further. It has this gospel message. Not what do I do, but what did God do for me? The gospel message is that Jesus, both God and man, came into the world, lived, preached, and then died for each of us. He made it possible for us to go to heaven. And that's what makes Christianity different from other religions. Not about the rules, not about what I do, but what God did for me. God accepts you not on your own work, but on the work of Jesus. The works that we do are complementary to the works that Jesus did. They help us to grow. They help us to learn our faith, to make it part of ourselves, to make it a default condition for us. But it is the work of Jesus that is the most important. The gospel is not about advice. It's not about ways to live your life. It is an announcement of what God did for us. Now, why is all this important? Is to say that the Order of Lepanto, the men here, we are targeted specifically in the new evangelization. We reach out to Catholics, to Catholic men, to active Catholic men, to lukewarm Catholic men, to lapsed Catholic men, to Catholic men who maybe have started considering other religions. Catholic men specifically, and our message to Catholic men is specifically, there are masculine activities within the church that speak to the masculine spirit, that are in line with Catholic teaching, in line with the way we're supposed to live our lives, and in line with the gospel message. And we show you how to live out your life around these principles. But we also teach this great masculine martial art of the knights, how to fight with a sword, how to defend yourself or your family physically. And through that, we build a camaraderie with the other men in our groups. And then we take that camaraderie and we turn it to prayer, and we turn it to how do we fulfill our duties as husbands and fathers, as whether that's a spiritual father or a physical father. And that is what the new evangelization is about, addressing the needs of the people in the pews, or in the pews sometimes, and to bring them back into the fullness of the truth. Bring the faith as part of the living experience of daily life. So come out, see what we do, get a little dirty with the guys, swing a sword, and build a friendship. And through it, build friendship with Jesus and his church, and let it change your life. Deo gratias.